evening, everybody, and welcome to Full Council today, Thursday, the 22nd of June. The first item on our agenda is declarations of interest. Do I have any, please? No? Thank you. The second item on our agenda is the minutes of our previous meeting. Are there any issues to do with those minutes, please? If not, could I have Sorry, Councillor Marcus.
There's just an issue on page 11 about the members elected to the Capital and Property Board. I think I've already communicated that to Andy, so actually corrected.
You got that, Andy?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Any other issues, please? So could I have a proposer for the adoption of these minutes? Councillor Watt, seconded Councillor Grottick. All those in favour? Carried, thank you. Item 3 on our agenda is Chairman's announcements. I have none. Item 4, questions under Standing Order 14. I have none. Item 5, to consider reports from committees or draft minutes for information. I have none. Item 6, to consider motions in accordance with Standing Order 12. There are none. Item 7, urgent items. I do not have any urgent items. So we will move straight into part 1 and item 8 on our agenda, which is the Isles of Scilly Sea Links project. And I'd like to hand over to our project director for major projects, Nigel Blackler. Thank you, Nigel.
Thank you, Chair, and good evening, everyone. I hope everybody can hear me, not only in the chamber, but also online. Please indicate if you can, and I will speak a bit louder. Good. Thank you very much. Thanks for this opportunity to present this report to you this evening. I'm going to briefly take you through the report and the recommendations that appear at the front of the report, and explain just briefly a little bit of the background behind each of those recommendations. I'll then conclude with a short summary, and then I will pass on to the Chief Executive to conclude the introduction by the officers to you this evening of this report, and then we're happy to take questions. So the aim of the report is to provide an update on progress in delivering the programme of work approved by the Council and the Department for Transport in September 2022. The report that you have before you this evening seeks approval from Full Council to the further actions required by the Council to maintain the opportunity to use the 48.4 million of levelling up funding to deliver the new vessels and associated harbour infrastructure to provide the Sea Link services in the future. Now, if I take you through each of the recommendations briefly in turn. Recommendation 1 is to note the update on progress undertaken in delivering the work programme, approved in response to the points raised in the letter from the Minister for Aviation, Maritime and Security in August 2022. The programme of work was intended to be completed to allow all parties to make informed decisions in February 2023. It still remains important that we achieve this, as the consequences of the decisions we take will be with us for the next 30 years. There are a large number of appendices attached to the report that you have before you today. And what I wanted to do in bringing this report to you, the first time that we've brought a report to Full Council since September 2022, is to bring together all the key documents and report all the developments that have taken place since you last considered this project at Full Council. So not only does the report this evening provide you with decisions to take for the project going forward, it also brings together all the information relating to the period since you last considered this project. So the report will be a record, effectively, of the progress and developments that have taken place, some of which were foreseen, some of which weren't foreseen, but we now have a record in one place for use in the future. The second recommendation is to note the key findings of the Transport User Survey carried out by the National Independent Watchdog for Transport Users, Transport Focus. Now, this was undertaken to update the business case required to draw down the 48.4 million of levelling up funding. It was not solely focused on Sea Link services. It looks across the different modes of transport that the islands relies upon. And not surprisingly, it draws out from the users the importance of the scheduling and the cost of ferry service as critical factors. I won't go into the rest of the results, but the full report is appended to the report that you have before you this evening. Recommendation 3 is a proposal that we undertake a further transport survey in 2024 to continue to monitor user satisfaction and support the case for investment in transport services, not just the Sea Link. It's proposed that we extend this survey to include visitors and workers to the islands, and that the cost of the survey be met from the project development funding which we've been provided by the Department for Transport. Moving on to recommendation 4, this proposes that the Council continues to lead the delivery of the project and take the steps set out in this report to ensure progress continues to be made as quickly as possible. I recognise that progress in some areas has been slow and that we need to ensure that we move forward from this point and make greater progress. Why is that important? Well, that's important in terms of making sure that we retain the opportunity to use the levelling up funding to deliver this project. And it's important that you as members this evening consider the Council's role in taking the project forward. You are currently the accountable body for the levelling up funding. It's only the Council that can be the accountable body for that. So you reconfirming you continue to lead the project means that the Council will continue to be the accountable body and we will continue to have the levelling up funding available to us. In order to take the project forward, it's important to set out the revised work programme, recognising, as I said earlier, that we're not where we want to be on the project at the moment, but looking forward, what's the programme of further work and what are the key dates that we need to make. So we've put forward to you an indicative revised project work programme, which is subject to confirmation from the Department for Transport that they'll continue to cover all the Council's costs. It's recommended that members approve that programme for the project going forward. In terms of funding for all the work that's entailed in that programme, your members will recall that in December 2022, we were granted development funding by the Department for Transport, and that continues to be available and will cover the costs of taking forward the project in this current financial year, 2023-24. A summary of the full indicative revised work programme is attached at Appendix G to your report. I now move on to recommendations 6 and 7, and these are the two key recommendations in the report before you this evening. The first is that members approve the publication of a prior information notice by the Council as soon as possible following a further consultation meeting with the Department for Transport and the Minister for Aviation, Maritime and Security. This action is required to provide the commercial input that we need into the full business case so that it can be submitted to the Department for Transport and the Council can then gain access to the 48.4 million of levelling up funding that is available. I would stress in this recommendation that whilst we are looking for you, the members, to approve the publication of a prior information notice, we are proposing that it be in further consultation with a meeting with the Department for Transport and Minister. Recommendation 7 is to approve the principle of a special purpose vehicle proposed by the Department for Transport to receive the levelling up funding from the Council and be responsible for procuring the new vessels and commissioning the Sea Link service. The Council continues to work with the Department for Transport on this, on the detailed proposals for a special purpose vehicle. And I know that it's attracted a lot of debate in the run-up to this meeting. But I would stress that there's still a lot of work to do to actually come up with a special purpose vehicle that meets all the requirements for the Sea Link service. However, the Department for Transport identified this as the best way in which the Council can receive the levelling up funding, but pass the funding to another body in order that the vessels be procured, an operator be commissioned to provide the services, recognising the key thing of the size of the council. We are unable to carry that level of risk, but we are the accountable body for the funding. So it was about finding the appropriate mechanism that recognises the size of the council. We don't have the ability to carry major risk, but we still need to have a way in which this project is delivered. So it is very much going to be a bespoke solution to our circumstances. We then move on to recommendation 8, and this is the proposal that there be a further report to full council in November 2023. Now, we set that date based around the indicative programme because at that point, if we were to go ahead with the prior information notice process, which runs 3 months, then we would be able to bring that back to council at that time. We would also be confident that we'd have detailed proposals for establishing a special purpose vehicle, and we would, at that point, be seeking approval from you, the members, to submit a revised business case to the Department for Transport. So I think the commitment to come back to council is always there on this project, but we've set that date in November 23 around those events. That may well change in the light of how the project progresses, but I think it's important that we give you the commitment that we will be back at a key point in the project to seek further approval from members. At the moment, that's the best estimate we can give you, but we could well be back before then. And then finally, under recommendation 9, is delegated authority be given to the chairman of the council to write to both the Secretary of State for Levelling Up Housing and Communities, that's the Right Honourable Michael Gove, who is responsible for levelling up, and the Minister for Aviation, Maritime and Security, that's Baroness Veer, to inform them of the decisions taken by full council this evening. If I could just conclude by summarising the current position. The programme of work approved by the council and agreed by the DFT in September 2022 was intended to put members, government ministers, the steamship company, harbour owners and other stakeholders in a position to make informed decisions about how best to deliver the new vessels, the harbour improvements required to meet the objectives for future Sea Link services set out in the council's levelling up bid. As explained in this report, we have not reached that position but continue to work to achieve it. However, in the meantime, it is important that we continue to demonstrate that the project is still progressing in order to maintain the opportunity to use the levelling up funding allocated to the project. The recommendations set out in this report are intended to achieve this. When the council was granted £48.4 million of levelling up funding in round 1, it was the second highest award to a local authority in England. In round 2, announced in January, of the 530 bids submitted by local authorities, only 20% were successful, leaving a considerable unmet demand for this funding. If we do not maintain progress on the project, we therefore increase the risk the funding will be withdrawn and reallocated to other local authorities who are in a position to deliver levelling up projects in their areas. I'd like to thank members for the opportunity to introduce you the report this evening, and take you through the recommendations. And if I may, Chair, I'd like to hand across to the Chief Executive for closing remarks on behalf of the officers introducing this report. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Nigel.
Chief Executive.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Nigel. I think it's fair to say that we're all incredibly frustrated with the time that this project has gone on. And equally, we all have as many questions about the details of the special purpose vehicle that we're talking about today, which is the model that clearly is preferred by the Department of Transport as a way of unlocking the funds, as Nigel said. If the Council agrees today, we will continue to work with the Department of Transport and a commercial partner to try to seek to answer all those questions and then bring that model back to Council before any submission, as Nigel said. In the letter that we received from Baroness Veer, the Shipping Minister, on the 12th of June, she encouraged the Council to continue to work with the DFT, recognising the lifeline nature of the route particularly. And since that time, the DFT themselves have met all the partners to outline their preferred solution for an SPV and seeking support from partners to work with them and the Council to work up the detail. In doing so, the government made very clear in numerous letters that it's encouraging the steamship group to work alongside both the council and the government to shape the model and to thrash out the details of which we all need more information. When that detail is available, a proposal will come back to this council because it's the council that will need to submit the final business case to the government in order to unlock the funds. So today, the ask of the council is purely, are you prepared to continue to work with the Department of Transport on a special purpose vehicle in order that those details can be worked up and brought back to you for final decision to unlock the £48 million of this project for this essential lifeline service. And from our perspective, not to do so would seem premature without many of those questions still to be answered. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much, Paul. I'd now like to pass over to our lead member for Transport, Councillor Sims, please.
Yeah, thank you. Well, lots of us in here haven't had the good fortune to have been enmeshed in this process in various stages for the last 4 or 5 years. But and I think throughout most of that period, we worked really harmoniously with the steamship company. It's been a really good, strong relationship, and obviously we diverged last August. But I very, very much hope that the steamship company will come back on board with this, fully engaged with the levelling up process, because, well, that'd be nice. But also, it would make the whole thing a lot easier and a lot less messy. But you don't. So this evening, we're making the most important decision, I think, of my 10 years as a councillor. One that will have a huge impact on the future viability of the islands. At the moment, there's absolutely nothing really levelling up on the table for the DFT. And unless we, in principle, adopt the SPV PIN model, there'll still be nothing on the table. And as Nigel said, it's the second highest levelling up bid in the country, but it'll wither and die. It's that stark. And to give this a bit of a wider context, 50 million quid is a little bit more than 120% of the island's total GDP. And throwing it away is exactly the same as the UK government spurning £2.6 billion gift from the IMF or somebody and throwing it away. Because they'd rather borrow the money instead. The SPV won't be imposed from on high with no regard to profitability or social amenity. It's the council's bid, and the council will have enormous input into the parameters of the SPV. And you don't have to be a telepath to note that everybody's really frustrated because we don't know the SPV is necessarily amorphous. It doesn't exist until we follow this process, and then it will come to the board, and then it will be discussed. And the council, as I said, will have huge input into it, but it will be a tripartite agreement with the operator, which I hope will be the steamship company, the council, and the DFT. And all three parties have got the interest of the islands at heart. I know the DFT have got the interest of the islands at heart. They've been very clear about it. And look how they jumped in so quickly with COVID, which was a game changer for us. I don't know where we would have been without it. And the other good thing about COVID, that's the correct phrase really, but you know what I mean, was it firmly put us on the DFT radar. They know who we are, what we are, and what our needs are. And that's really important. And that's why they're putting so much effort into this. But the DFT has been very clear that a private equity model cannot deliver levelling up. I quote Baroness Veer in the March 17th letter in which the steamship's 4951 proposal was rejected. In one sentence in there, she says, in order to return the value to lenders and others, the ISSG could potentially have to raise passenger fares and freight charges significantly, increasing the disparity between the islands and the mainland, therefore running counter to levelling up ambitions. So in a sense, that tells us what the DFT expect this process to deliver for the islands, levelling up, which should be an absolute no-brainer, but I think sometimes we need to be reminded of this. And in that particular instance, 4951, this was a loan in the region of perhaps £12 million, I don't really know, not £33 million, which clearly the extra money borrowed will have a significantly greater impact on fares and freight charges. So whilst we don't have, or more to the point, can have the SPV numbers at this stage, this letter gives a clear steer as to what the DFT expects the grant to deliver for the islands. Whatever the terms of the SPV are, the DFT, the council, and the steamship company, I hope, all have the interests of the islands at heart. And I think it's actually worth noting at this point that the DfT have shown enormous commitment to the project to a very real extent, and they understand our situation, which was not the case pre-COVID. DfT are a huge organisation with a huge budget, and this project probably costs less than a motorway bridge across the M62. However, they put a disproportionate amount of resources and very senior officer time into this, and have demonstrated that they are determined to get it over the line. And what we have to do tonight is enable this. We should all bear in mind that the primary recommendations of this agenda are in principle. We are not committing ourselves to anything. There are no strings, but we will be making sure that almost £50 million stays on the table. And the DfT, quite reasonably, are insistent on an SPV, and we must respect that. And if we throw out this bid and it's lost, if we throw out the recommendations tonight, I think the bid is lost, because there simply isn't time to come back with a revised proposal. We're certainly not going to do it in July, but by September, I think the tide's gone out too far. So I really hope we pass these recommendations tonight.
Thank you very much, Councillor Sims. Now I'm going to pass to the Vice Chair.
Thank you, Chair. I hope we all agree it's a privilege to sit in these seats, and we all serve to try and enhance the lives of our fellow islanders on all the islands. We must consider how best to achieve this, as we work with all members of our council family to provide the services that are needed. Another key aim must surely be to ensure the economic viability of our islands now and in the future. I hope we can focus on the bigger picture, which is that here we have over £48 million of levelling up funding on offer in order to protect the economic viability of these islands. And as we know, the cost of fares and freight charges are fundamental in this regard. By accepting the resolutions tonight, we will continue on a journey to achieve the aims of levelling up in a way that private financing arrangements cannot. As Councillor Sims has said, we are just agreeing the principle at this point. The special purpose vehicle will hold the grant money and is recommended by the Department of Transport. We also need a prior information notice in order to provide the market and business information that is needed. However, it is important to state that this would not exclude the steamship company returning to the table should they wish. I hope that we will all feel able to grasp this opportunity and continue this exciting journey. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I can't see any lights on. Councillor Mumford. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. The Council are the accountable body for the 48.4 million of levelling up funding allocated to the Isles of Scilly Sea Links project. We need to move on. Approve in principle the special purpose vehicle. All the details are in Appendix K. A regular and affordable lifeline service is essential to the economy of these islands. The Isles of Scilly Steamship Company has served these islands for over 100 years, but times are changing and we need to move forward to find an affordable solution, not only for islanders, but for our visitors as well. I would sincerely hope that the Isles of Scilly Steamship Company Group will work with partners to come to the best solution for our islands.
Thank you, Councillor Mumford. Councillor Bedford, please.
Thank you. Councillor Sims refers to approximately 10 years regarding the Sea Link journey. However, I think it's worth noting that the Isles of Scilly Sea Link project has a reoccurring theme regarding the Council of the Isle of Scilly and the Isles of Scilly Sea Link go back more than 20 years. If you just bear with me just for about 2 minutes. In 2002, the Council of the Isles of Scilly commissioned a project into transport connectivity. The aim being to address transport issues on these islands in a comprehensive, creative and sustainable manner, community, environment and the economy. Significant resources were used to no effect, as the outcome was no change to the ceiling services. Between 2006 and 2011, the Council of the Isles of Scilly worked with Cornwall Council to improve transport links in Cornwall and the Isles of Scilly, namely the route partnership. There was a view that the sea-link service was causing economic hardship to the island and the ferry and freight ships were coming to the end of their working life, with both ships due for decommissioning by 2015. A £39 million grant was sought to replace these two vessels. The Isles of Scilly Steamship Group were unsuccessful during the initial tendering process. However, the company who were awarded the tender changed their minds, politics intervened, and the route partnership was no more. Once again, significant financial resources appeared wasted and no perceivable sea-link improvement. The Isles of Scilly Steamship Group undertook work to ensure their present vehicle fleet would safely continue in service, which remains ongoing and more challenging as each year passes without the prospect of replacement vehicles. In 2019, the Isles of Scilly Steamship Company commenced the process to replace their present fleet, and then the opportunity for applying for levelling up funding came along, and in 2021 a partnership was formed between the Council of the Isles of Scilly, the Duchy of Cornwall, Tresco Estate and the Steamship Group to obtain funding in the form of a sea transport levelling up bid. May the 20th, 2021, two recommendations to full council were passed. These were that members endorsed the rationale to work solely with the Isles of Scilly Steamship Group in terms of vessel provision and service operations. The second recommendation, which was also passed, was for the scope of levelling up funding to not only include vehicle replacements but the associated infrastructure. I am unclear whether these resolutions are still valid. The ceiling levelling up bid was successful. However, over 2 years on, we have seemed to enter a time loop which started over 20 years ago. The Department of Transport and the Isles of Scilly Steamship Group have stated they are unable to cross their red line, and it appears that both are waiting for each other to blink. The levelling up partners, Duchy of Cornwall, Tresco Estate and the Steamship Group and Derek Thomas have all contacted me and shared their point of view. Disappointingly, not one Council of the Isles of Scilly consultant has bothered to respond to any of my emails and questions. I have some sympathy for the position of the partners who agreed to the levelling up process with the Council of the Isles of Scilly. Nevertheless, I represent the community and the people who have contacted me state, please undertake a scoping exercise to ascertain whether there is genuine interest out there to provide a sea-link service which meets the original aspirations of the sea-link levelling up bid. It is therefore my view that we seem to be revisiting this well-walked path of spending significant amounts of money using officers' time, often at the detriment of smaller but important island issues, and getting precisely nowhere. By agreeing to recommendation 6 of this report, it could potentially move us from where there are no winners, especially not for the community, and after reading and evaluating thousands of words, I cannot see another option but to support recommendation 6 at this time. But I actually question why we need 9 recommendations. I can understand 1 and 2, but I can understand 6 and number 9, but I can't actually understand the point of the other recommendations. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Bedford. Do you wish to comment, Mark?
No, carry on. I'll take Councillor Williams next. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Yeah, I think I just got a general sense of scepticism and pessimism about the report before us. It's just so disappointing that what struck us as being a golden opportunity a few years ago seems to be slipping through our fingers. And despite the effort and energy that's been put in from officers and members. We don't seem to be anywhere further than just waiting for someone else to blink, and I'm not sure the departments are going to blink, and I don't think the steamship company are going to blink, so I'm not optimistic that's going to happen. I'm also sceptical that there's enough market out there for two competing operators, particularly on the freight side of things, so it just stores up problems for further down the line potentially. So I'll be supporting the recommendations tonight, hoping that some miracle solution could be found, but not particularly optimistic that will be the case. But my question, Nigel, isn't to do with this paper, but is to do with operations. It seems to me we could have the best freight ships in the world, but until the infrastructure in Penzance is dramatically improved, which harks back to, I'd say, Victorian times with what would have been donkey and carts replaced by articulated lorries, a lot of the freight situation isn't going to change. So that the ship will be all shiny and new, but we'll still be stuck with the complexities of blind corners and delivery at an inappropriate location. Are part of your conversations which are going on with the department encompassing that position? Because I can't see a great deal changing with the way that freight is received on Scilly until there are significant changes to the way freight arrives in Penzance.
Nigel, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Councillor Williams, for your question. It's a very good point that you make, and the importance of not having upgraded St Mary's Harbour to improve the facilities of passengers and freight there as a separate project. And now the Levelling Up project bringing forward potentially new vessels, it does leave the Penzance end of the operation not included within this project. And as you say, it needs to be a complete service, both for passengers and freight. I worked on the route partnership proposal at Cornwall Council. I was the lead officer at Cornwall Council for that project, and at that time we did that. The project that we put before government was for improvements to both harbours of St Mary's and Penzance, and as you know, the Penzance one was quite an extensive proposal in terms of a new passenger and freight facility built out into the sea in order to receive freight, process it and load it on the vessel, as well as new vessels as well. And ultimately, that led to a lot of difficulty with that project and was one of the key reasons why it wasn't successful at the end of the day, because it attracted quite a lot of debate within Penzance and some very well organised opposition to that proposal. Coming now to the Levelling Up Fund, and the maximum you could bid for was £50 million. So when we came together with the partners, Steamship Group, Duchy and Tresco, and looked at the requirements that we have for new vessels, the 3 vessels that are needed to replace the existing ones, and the harbour infrastructure improvements that are required at St Mary's and Tresco to provide the services, when you looked at the value of all those works, that fitted within the £50 million maximum sum we could bid for. We had to make sufficient contingencies within that to cover off the unforeseen and unknowns that we had at that time in terms of what the final cost of the vessels would be, what the final cost of the works would be. There wasn't enough room within the Levelling Up bid to include improvements to Penzance as well. However, mindful that that also needs to be part of this, Penzance themselves have bid for Towns Fund money to bring forward improvements in the harbour, and they have a specific allocation within that to improve the harbour in terms of passenger and freight facilities. Now, whether ultimately that sum is enough, I don't know, but the Penzance Harbour, which is owned by Cornwall Council, the Maritime Manager at Cornwall Council has been in discussions with the Steamship Group in terms of developing proposals for the harbour, which would see an improvement in freight and passenger facilities at that end. So that is taking place in parallel. I think so there is an opportunity there. It may be that the funding is insufficient to do everything they'd like to do, but it is a project which Penzance and Penzance Harbour are conscious of in Cornwall Council, are leading on with Penzance. So it is not something that's been forgotten. And I agree with you. It needs to be a holistic solution. And that is something that we're in discussions with Cornwall Council and their Maritime Manager to make sure that we can help in any way we can. But also I think it was important that we took the opportunity that Levelling Up provided to do as much as we can for the Sea Link service And it may be that we have to work with Cornwall Council to increase the funding they've got available for the harbour in the future to make sure that this will happen. My view is that once there's a commitment to build the vessels, I think there will be a greater impetus to look at Penzance Harbour and a greater case to make sure that those improvements are put in place in time for when the new vessels arrive. It's a lengthy explanation, but I hopefully it reassures you that we're not forgetting about that part. There is money available. There is a will there. But also I'm very mindful of the route partnership experience and not wanting this project to be beholden to improvements there. So there's nothing that could happen there that would disrupt this bid. And also being respectful of what were quite polarised views back in Penzance back then. So letting the solution be generated from within Penzance, I thought was a best approach this time round. Thank you.
Thank you, Nigel. Thank you, Councillor Williams. Councillor Watt, please.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. A hypothetical question in many ways, but then most of this debate is bound to be hypothetical until we get to more concrete figures. But I just wonder if any of the officers believe or think that an extension of the lease may bring the steamship company back to the table. I mean, 3 to 5 years for a lease for a bid of this size is surely won't attract any other operator. So if it was, say, 15 years or more, would that be more effective?
Nigel?
Thank you, Councillor Watt. You make a very good point. There are two periods which need to be considered here in the emerging proposals for a special purpose. Beg your pardon. Sorry, members. Okay, the 3 to 5 years that has been talked about is the period that's being considered should the steamship group decide they want to be part of a special purpose vehicle and the operator. They would work with the Department for Transport and the Council to finalise the designs for the vessels, procure the vessels from shipyards, and then introduce those vessels into service. Now, the 3 to 5 year period that's being talked about by the Department for Transport and is not fixed at this moment is the period then that the steamship group would be given to operate the service before the government would require the route to be competitively tendered. Now, if the route then is competitively tendered, it's proposed that that would be for a much longer period. Because as you say, you won't want to do that every 3 to 5 years. In fact, if you look at the examples in Scotland, it's 10 years, it's 15 years, they're even looking for longer periods now, because it's quite a big undertaking to run a tendering exercise, evaluate that, and for operators to bid in for that. It also, as you say, is not very attractive for operators if they're bidding for very short periods of time. They want the certainty going forward. So that's where the two different periods come into play. There is as has been discussed with the department, the opportunity for the steamship group to lead it, introduce the vessels, and operate it for a certain period. And that debate hasn't concluded yet, but figures of 3, 5, 7 years have been talked about. But the ministers have been quite clear. They want to see competition at some point, and that was in Minister Coates' letter, and it was reaffirmed by Baroness Beer. So at some point there will be a competitive process. One would say the steamship group, if they've been operating it for say 5 years or 7 years, will be very well placed to win that because they have all the knowledge, the expertise, and I think other operators would look at it and go, well, do I really want to go to the time and expense of bidding in? Some may, but I still think the steamship group would be in a very good position to win that, and then it's likely to be a 10 or 15-year period, possibly longer, that they would have the right to operate with reviews of certain points. I hope that explains it. Thank you.
Thank you, Nigel. Thank you, Councillor Watt. Councillor Roger, please.
Oh, yes, thank you, Chair. I'm happy to support the recommendations as before us this evening. If not, because it seems to be the only way we can ensure that that money stays at the table, and I think that's the vital piece of information in there. Unfortunately, the other information we don't have at this stage. I refer to a letter that Ian Sibley and I sent out to the business community in the last few days, and that gathers support from the business community each hour, and I could say about 50 signatories are on that letter at the moment. It simply states that it wishes, in a spirit of compromise, that the Isles of Scilly Steamship Company, the council and the council of the Isles of Scilly get around the table and thrash this out to ensure, one, that the £48.4 million of levelling up money is not lost, and two, in the ideal world, that the Isles of Scilly Steamship Company continue to operate our sea-link services. And I think the wish of the business community certainly is that that should happen. And I think after this evening, and with hopefully these recommendations being passed, we should hopefully use tonight's meeting to ensure that that happens. Because I think having an open meeting that the steamship company willingly comes to, and I would urge them to do such, hopefully a solution can be found to this impasse, because it would be, hugely bad decision on all our parts to lose that money for this community and the future of the islands. The letter will continue to gather signatories, and I'll pass that on to Council and the steamship company early next week.
Thank you, Councillor Roger. I would like to say from the chair that I have given Ian Howard an invitation for that meeting, and I'm waiting to get a reply. So hopefully that will happen in early July. But they have had that invitation from the council. Councillor Peacock, please.
Yeah, I again will end up supporting the recommendations, especially number 6, but I have some reservations. And I think my biggest reservation is this situation whereby one of our existing infrastructures, vessels, breaks down. If the steamship company does not come to the table, I need to be convinced that there will be an alternative service provider. At the moment, we have, as everybody knows, 3 ways of getting to the islands. We've got the helicopters, we've got the planes, and we've got the vessels. All 3, like a 3-legged chair, you take one of those away, and the system fails. So I just want to really highlight my concerns at this point, that we make sure that whatever we do moving forward from this point on, that we are always aware in our own minds that we are dealing with very aged vessels now. And it's critical, in my view, that we give all the support we can to the incumbent operator until such times as that incumbent operator is no longer operating on our behalf. Second point is there are all sorts of figures being bandied around depreciation and costs. I think it's critical that those costs are actually clarified. It's very hard as a councillor. I'm a new councillor, but I'm unusually a transport operator sitting here. And I looked at this with my business head on as much as anything, and it's very hard to come to that decision to approve if you haven't got the full facts. And I completely accept that we're operating on an SPV, and the SPV is going to be built up as we move along the project. But I feel it's really critical we make sure at every stage that we have that in our back of our minds. And the final thing I would urge the council to consider is this is a capital budget, capital fund. It's not a revenue fund currently. So there's all sorts of people telling me that the fares are going to reduce. Again, sitting here, I don't particularly feel the fares will reduce currently. So I would also urge, in the discussions with DfT and the steamship company, we come up to a mechanism that guarantees, at the very minimum, the fares stay similar to what they are now, which is really what the all-important thing is for the island. We've got to break this increase in costs. It's not good for the business community. It's not good for islanders trying to get on and off. People talking to me already. I've been a councillor for 2 weeks. I've already had a conversation with a member of the public who can't fly off in the winter. They can't get to a medical appointment. This is not the right state of affairs. We live in the 21st century. People should, with whatever budget they have, get from these islands off and back on again. So I think that's what I'm going to say on the subject. But I passionately believe that it's critical for these islands, A, that we support the bid. Now, it makes best use of the money, but we really bear in mind the fact it's a capital project, and we really bear in mind the figures being bandied around. And we make sure moving forward that anybody that wants to get off this island in any way can do.
Thank you, Councillor Peacock. Chief Executive, please.
Thank you, Councillor Peake. There's only a quick comment from me, really. One, you're absolutely right. I mean, I think the point about continuing to work on the SPV is to get to the questions that we all want to know about. I've heard figures bandied about and tested with the Department of Transport, and they have no recollection or any understanding of the figures that are being bandied about. So I think we just don't need to get to one version of the truth, and then we'll be able to move forward from that. But I just also remind colleagues that back when Robert Courts, the shipping minister, wrote to us, originally he did make an offer about contingency. He did make an offer about understanding whether there needed to be support in the interim period, and obviously that's still on the table for us to progress if our partners wish to.
Thank you, Chief Executive. I would just like to comment from the Chair, Councillor Peacock, that your comments are not falling on deaf ears. This Council has been working all the way along to try and make sure that our fares are affordable for our residents and for our visitors into the future. And the SPV, the Special Purpose Vehicle that Officer Nigel is working on, is working with the DfT to try and bring those fares down. I don't know whether you'd like to comment on that, Nigel, but we absolutely understand we've got people in our community who are literally marooned on these islands, and as beautiful as they are, it's not a suitable state of affairs, and we have to sort that out, and that is what levelling up is all about, so that they have an opportunity to get on and off the islands regularly. So Nigel, would you just like to comment on that, please?
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Peacock, you're entirely right about highlighting the fact that this is capital funding that's available to us, and that effectively buys things. But what it doesn't do is subsidise fares. But in this instance, the 48.4 million of levelling up funding is intended to achieve that objective, levelling up, which does mean making these services affordable and putting in place a model of operation which will achieve that affordability going forward, both for passengers and freight, for residents, businesses, and visitors to the Isles. So the way in which the special purpose vehicle is, if we go down that route, set up, how the charges operate within that model are really important. We need to get that right. The Department for Transport understand the importance of that. It is not one that's been picked off the shelf. We've used it somewhere else. Therefore, this is the one you can have and you must fit within it. It's something that they're looking at and saying it has to be designed in a way that meets the unique nature of this route. And it must result in affordable fares and freight tariffs, not just in the first year or the second year, but throughout its operation. We have to use this opportunity, its capital funding, to achieve effectively, as you highlighted, a revenue objective. Because there isn't an opportunity to say, great, we've got the boats, we've done the harbours, but it's still a service which is not affordable. Please, government, can we have an annual subsidy, bring those costs down? Because the government have made quite clear, we do not want to sign up for a revenue subsidy for these services for the next 30 years. So we've got to take this opportunity of the capital funding and put in place a model which means that it will achieve that objective. And so everything that's being looked at in terms of the special purpose vehicle and the experts that are looking at this within the DfT, we're constantly reminding them that must be an outcome, because if it isn't, it won't be acceptable to the council. Okay, so when we bring the details back the Department for Transport are satisfied that that's the best approach for us, that's going to be one of the key tests. And that's one of the things that we're going to have to model financially to make sure that's the case, because we get one chance to do this. And as I say, I've worked with the department for many years. Capital is something that, they are prepared to, if you put a good case forward, as we have in this case for Levelling Up, to grant you that money. Ongoing revenue support is not something that is very easy to get in these situations. And also, it would leave us exposed to future changes in governments and future changes in spending priorities in the future. We don't want that. We want a model here that's going to work for 30 years and be confident that it can adapt to changing circumstances. If fuel costs go up, then these charges would need to come down. It has to be flexible in that way so the operator can continue to make these services affordable. I hope that's helpful. I recognise we're not there yet, but we've got more to do. But I'm really pleased you raised it this evening. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Councillor Marcus, please.
Again, I am minded to support the recommendations. I think when I'm taking controversial decisions, I think about how I would defend them to the public and the electorate. I can't think of any reasonable ways to object to this proposal, that there would be any reasonable defence to anyone who asked me about it. A couple of points on the recommendations, though. Just with the survey, recommendation 2, I know that some of the results are collated rather than the full results. It would be great if the actual full results could be highlighted sent around to members previously, and when the next survey happens, those full results are made available so members can make their own mind rather than being pushed in a direction. That'd be really good. And on recommendation 6, it talks about delegating the final part of the PIN to the Chief Exec and the DFT. I just want to make sure, because like you just said in your previous answer, the PIN is going to set out the boundaries and the information that we get back in that define the SPV. I just want to make sure that we've got a island voice in there, and we need to make sure that we've got the right questions asked. So I just wonder whether we can be guaranteed that the chairman and the lead member can have oversight of that process as well, or even sent out to members before, or I don't know, just how that will work in terms of confidentiality. But I just want to make sure there's a democratic input into that final version as well.
Yeah, that's accepted, Councillor Marcus. Thank you. Councillor Sims, please.
A couple of small points. Just in response to Joel's question, Penzance Harbour, I have had a conversation with my opposite number on Cornwall Council. It's quite humorous conversation, really. Apparently, there are more reactionary elements in Penzance, and I understand there are quite a lot of them, are up in arms because the meadery might have to be knocked down. So the plans have sort of moved forward a little bit. I know maybe on the basis that Bryce visited the meadery afterwards to Factory Rocks. I don't know, but and the other point was just what Nigel just said. I mean, in sort of perhaps simpler terms, if it's a 30-year lifetime for the vessels, 50 million quid, that's about £1.5 million revenue subsidy, if you like, over the course of the lifetime. It's an absolute no-brainer. And actually, while I'm here, I'd like to propose the recommendations.
Thank you. Let's just take Councillor Legg next, please.
Thank you, Chair. I have a lot of questions about the SPV, and for that reason, I'm minded to approve the recommendations. In fact, I will second them at this time as they have been proposed. However, looking at Appendix J and the sort of proposed timeline, we're looking at having vessels in the water in December 2027. Considering that at this point we have no design for the ships, is that a realistic time frame, considering that we have unique infrastructure, as has been mentioned, and the requirements of the route aren't necessarily standard? So a strong design period would be sensible. Is this realistic, this time frame?
Nigel?
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Legg, thank you for raising that point. When we put together this programme, we did consult with a shipyard, a very large shipyard that builds a lot of vessels, and to get a sense of timescales, which is why it's led us to actually set not one single date, but from June 27 to December 27, because it very much, as you highlighted, depends on the design you start with. If you pick up a design, as is the case of the steamship group, where they've already done some initial design work, then you start from a more advanced position, and then those designs are worked up to a point where yards can start constructing them. So there's a timeline associated with that. There's also a timeline associated with if you go for a bespoke vessel, because it is quite a unique operating characteristics. But the shipyard we had discussions, informal discussions with, just to get some input into the programme, said that there are also off-the-shelf vessels, if you like, that could be used to meet our requirements with some modification to meet our specific requirements of the route. And that would be a quicker way to bring them forward. And those vessels are already being built and are in operation in other parts of the world. So you can go and actually see them and you would take that. So if you start from that premise, that brings the process shorter. Now, I'm not saying which one of those is the most appropriate, so hence we put a range of dates in for when vessels can be in the water. But of course, with any programme, really you have to go back to the beginning and say, okay, if you start from here, July 23, once you start slipping in progress from here, it's going to have an impact at that far end. But we wanted to show the process throughout. The Department for Transport asked us to produce an indicative programme, which is what we've done. It will be subject to change as the project progresses. But at the moment, we've got the best available information to put those dates together. But it really depends on where you go in terms of your design as to how quickly that can be done. But we did get some shipyard input into that because we're not shipbuilders, as you know. So we get some commercial input, which was important. And we'd like a lot more of that in the project because that brings greater insight and greater confidence in delivery.
Thank you. Yeah, I agree. And for the reason that commercial input is important, that's why we need the PIN. So yeah, I'm happy to second the proposals.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Bedford, please.
Could you just clarify on recommendation 5, it's about the drawdown of the money from the 4.8 development. One page it says 1.5 million, and another page is 1.6. What is it, please? There's 1.5 on one page and 1.6 on the other.
Russell, can you hear us, please?
Yeah, and Chair. The figure, it isn't an exact 1.6 anyway, but it's for purposes of this, 1.6 is the right figure. That is the figure that's in the letter that I've received and I signed off.
That comes out to 48 million.
That's not necessarily the case, no, because the 1.6 million is revenue funding that the Department of Transport have had to find from elsewhere, not from the levelling up pot. The levelling up pot is purely capital. So the 1.6 that's been allocated to us is from a different source of funding. Whether government in their final thing decide to try and reduce the 48.4 by a sum equivalent to 1.6, we don't know. But at the moment, it is from a different funding source.
Thank you, Russell. Thank you, Councillor Bedford. So I have a proposer and a seconder for these recommendations. All those in favour, please. It's unanimous, I think. Thank you. Thank you very much. Sorry it was a long debate, members, but it's very important debate. So we'll move on swiftly. Item 9 is our communications working group.
Councillor Watt, please.
Thank you, Chairman. I'd like to propose, as well as the recommendation 1, that members consider making appointments, I'd like to propose the following, that we appoint the original members as were in place a few months ago, namely Councillors Watt, Sims, Legg, Grottick, with the addition of Councillor Avril Mumford. And also I noted that the chairman is on this particular working group when required, or when approached to attend. And could I remind members that this is not a committee, it's a working group, and therefore has no power to make decisions, just recommendations. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Watt. I would also remind members that this is open to all members. So if anyone wishes to join the working group at any time, they are welcome to do so. Councillor Bedford, please.
I'm a bit confused by this, sorry. If it's a non-decision making body, what is the point of it, please? We're taking time from councillors, and you're probably talking about quite serious things, so I just can't work out why it's non-decision making.
Okay, thank you. Would you like to answer that, please, Tom?
It could be a decision-making body. You could have a committee, and you could make decisions and delegate powers to that group. In its current format, it probably is best to describe it as a consultation group. So it is useful to officers to find out the views of a smaller group of members than all members. So it's obviously easier to speak to 5 people than 16. But all possibilities are open. If members didn't find that useful, absolutely you could consider a different body or no body, or all options are open, to be honest.
Thank you very much. Councillor Sims, please.
I was just going to say we have a number of non-decision making bodies. I mean, scrutiny is really, it makes recommendations, it doesn't make decisions, and also the Climate Adaptation Group is a non-decision making body. I mean, we have lots of them. It feeds into the bigger picture. I think that's basically it.
Thank you. Councillor Grottick.
Yes, just building on what Councillor Sims has said, obviously if there was any pivotal decisions, they would be forwarded to full council for approval.
Thank you. So I have Councillor Marcus.
I was going to second the proposal.
Thank you very much, Councillor Marcus. All those in favour, please. It's unanimous. Thank you very much. Moving swiftly on, item 10, our Island Futures Board terms of reference are in the hands of our Chief Executive. I'm going to hand over to Keith Grossett. Thank you, Keith.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, members. Purpose of this paper is to bring your attention to an allocation of £53,000 from the Community Levelling Up Fund, the Arts Facility, which is part of the wider Shared Prosperity Funds being administered by Cornwall. The Levelling Up Fund is intended to support community projects, and those funding projects that might not normally be business allocated or business focused, and will basically fund projects identified in our local prospectus, which was developed with the support of the Vice Chair and Chair. The second recommendation is to bring your attention to a change of the Island Futures Board terms of references. We'd like to suggest that they become the gateway body that monitors approval, grants, and applications to the Levelling Up Fund, Community Levelling Up Programme. Thank you.
Thank you, Keith. Councillor Bedford, please.
Keith, who can actually apply for it? Sorry.
So, community bodies, charities, schools.
I could send it. I've got some ideas.
Yes, we've got lots of people. We've got quite a pipeline of people who want to use those funds, and we'll be making, on the back of a pipeline, we'll be applying for the further £3.4 million.
To spend that as well.
I'm sure we can. So, fortunately, we've had a funding allocation from the programme to support a local facilitator who has been appointed, and I can get you in touch with her.
It has to align to the corporate plan, doesn't it?
It has to, not necessarily to the corporate plan, but to the prospectus that is identified in this paper as well. So if you've had an idea that fits in with the prospectus, that will go through. via Island Futures Board to the EPB.
You email me the person I have.
Of course, yes. Yes, well.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Williams, please.
Yes, so just to clarify, can the council apply for this fund?
Yes. Just so you know, it is a mix of capital and revenue as well.
Thank you. Councillor Mark.
How are we going to get reports back on the effectiveness of the funds and who it's been awarded to?
So the fund applications need to meet the outputs identified in the prospectus, and there'll be the reporting process will identify where the money's gone, what's been done with it, and how it's met those outputs within the wider Share Prosperity programme.
Are we going to get city specific as part of like the financial reporting, or is that going to be?
Yes, because the programme is run across 12 community area partnerships in Cornwall, and Scilly is the 13th, and we'll have a breakdown by community area partnership.
Thank you.
I'll propose the recommendations.
Thank you, Councillor Marcus. Seconded. Councillor Dean. All those in favour? Thank you. Passed. So we move on now to item 11, which is the advertising the post of Chief Executive and Head of Paid Service. We're obviously very sad to hear that our great Chief Executive is going to retire for the second time. He's already served us a lot longer than he originally thought he would be able to because of my badgering. But he's in trouble with his wife, and he's going to have to spend more time in the garden and around the kitchen sink, I think, in his house. But he is with us until Christmas, which we're very grateful for. But I will hand over this item to him. Thank you, Paul.
Thank you, Chairman. I'll say more later. It's been an absolute honour, to be able to work with what I think is one of the best councils in the country, and I'll be working with you up until that point and do my best to help get a good replacement for you.
Thank you very much, Paul. So, yes, we have to have a panel. I'm sorry, do you want to come in first, Councillor Legg?
I was just going to ask, it's almost about the panel itself. In previous Chief Executive replacement rounds, we have had the whole membership have an opportunity to meet prospective candidates. Is that still proposed?
Yeah.
Thank you. I'd just like to take this opportunity to wish the outgoing Chief Executive fair winds and safe sailing. So.
Chief Executive.
Yes, certainly. Councillor Legg, the proposal would be that, actually standing orders talk about 3 members. I think 5 is more appropriate for this appointment as it is for strategic directors, who would actually oversee the recruitment process. But there would be meeting, I'm sure as part of the process, there would be meeting with partners, there would be meeting with councillors, there would be meeting with staffs, all of who would have an input into the final decision of the panel before it comes back to full council. But the first part is to set up the 5-member panel so we can actually agree that process, and it's member-led.
And I do have well, first of all, Chair is supposed to sit on this, and I have representations for the Vice Chair to sit on it, and also Councillor Marcus, Councillor Sims, and Councillor Mumford. Does anybody else? There's only 5 places, I'm afraid, to this, but if anyone else wishes to put their name forward, then you're very welcome to do so. No, I can't see anybody wishing to do that. So I've come to Councillor Sims.
I'm very happy to propose the recommendations on that basis, and just to say how lucky we've been to get Paul, and I think it's going to be to our detriment when he goes, but probably to a more significant detriment to all the fishing in Cornwall to an annihilation.
Thank you. Councillor Guy.
Yeah, I'd like to second the recommendation as well. I'd just like to, from me personally, 10 years I've served as a councillor, and you've been an absolute star, Paul, I must say that. And you will be missed, I promise you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, members. I'm sure we'll have a lot more opportunity to thank Paul in due course. We've got a proposal and second. All those, please.
Chair, just before you go to the vote, please.
Thank you. Thank you, Matt Stokes, our monitoring officer. Thank you.
For the sake of completeness, can the recommendations be taken to include the appointment of the 5 members named, please?
Yes.
Because it doesn't at the moment. So if you can vote on the recommendations with also to include the appointment of the 5 members named, that will be complete for the record then.
Okay, thank you. So, Councillor Sims, you proposed this, didn't you?
Yes, I'm very happy to propose it with the 5 members named.
Yeah, and seconded by Councillor Guy, and you're happy for that. Thank you. Thank you. All those in favour? Thank you, that's unanimous. Thank you very much. Thank you, Matt, for sorting that for us. Right, we move on to item 12, which is our 4th quarter financial performance report in the hands of our 151 officer, Russell Ashman. Thank you, Russell.
Thank you, Chair. With the amount of time gone, I will canter through this as quickly as I can, and on that basis, that if there's any questions, members can either ask them at the end or I'm quite happy to answer them outside the meeting, but obviously just looking at the time and the other items we've got on the agenda. So I'll just focus on the key messages. The key message really in terms of the revenue budget, you'll see that the final outcome was actually a technical underspend of £522,000, which you'll think that's a significant swing from the forecast in the Q3 where we were forecasting an overspend of 135,000. So what's happened to create such a swing in one quarter? The majority of it, as you'll see on the table at the top of page 99, is the receipt of government grant of some £511,000, which we weren't expecting. I think in March the government had some unspent money. It was allocated out to local authorities. Some of it was just allocated out as a sum per a local authority. So where in the past we've argued that we get very small grant fundings, this happened to just say there's 100 local authorities, we've got this much to distribute, we divide it in, so we got a disproportionate amount in comparison to our size. So the majority of the swing was this unplanned government grant, and in there was also some grant which we weren't expecting for the transport project. Another slug of development money from the levelling up budget, which is coming from the 48.4. So the total underspend was 522,000 on that basis. But if you exclude the one-off plan government money, which it was one-off, it won't get repeated, I'm sure. Or if it is, I would be surprised. The actual underlying position was that we were slightly underspent by about £11,000. So in essence, we pretty much hit the budget on the head in terms of controlling our own spend. The fact we got a big underspend at the year end is down to being very lucky to get some additional government grant right at the end of the year. The majority of that we're putting away into reserve, which will help us deal with some issues. And one of the issues is later on the agenda about how we're dealing with some of the pressures on housing. So, good news story, and a good outcome at the end. And the fact that we're still living very close to our actual budget shows that our spending controls are doing well at the moment. If I run through very quickly that the capital budget, we actually overspent the last forecast, which is an extremely unusual position to be in as well. It's predominantly down to the Adaptation City project, where we spent far more than what was in the Q3 forecast. Still within total budget, it's just a change of profile over the various years. So it's a different position when I'm saying that we haven't slipped on the capital programme, we've actually accelerated on it. So that one might be one that we reserved for future. In fact, it's probably one of the only times any authority says that. I think generally the rest of it is there for you to read if you have any questions. Council tax and business rate collections are holding up. A little bit down on council tax, but almost equal offset with business rates. So still good, particularly in the difficult economic climate that we're in, where people are having difficulty. We seem to be holding up. Continually say that because we went through COVID and now we're in the cost of living crisis, and now the mortgage crisis is the next one coming. But things are holding up. The housing rate collection, the water rate are all continuing on. I think the water rates, we're beginning to get towards the end of how much we can really recover. We've moved 3-4 years away from 2020 now, and it's difficult to recover some of those sums, but we are still trying. We still haven't given up on them all yet. And from a statutory point of view, we've included in section 12 the Treasury indicators, which is a statutory requirement that we should do those in our outturn report. Nothing for any alarms or anything. Just we have to present those. It just shows the level of borrowing we're committed to, and the fact that at the moment we're significantly funding that borrowing from internal cash. At some point, the internal cash will probably start drying up, and we will have to go to the market to borrow. Hopefully, it will be in more than a couple of years' time when maybe rates will start coming back down, because obviously we're aware that it is not the right time to go into long-term borrowing at the moment with rates at an all-time high for the last 20 years. I will leave it there on the basis of time, Chair.
Thank you very much indeed, Russell, for that good news. Councillor Peake, sorry, I'll come to Vice Chair first, our Finance Lead. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Russell, for another good and clear report with, as you say, no surprises and a very useful grant. Pleasing for members to know that work is continuing on fair funding to recognise the challenges of our location and the extra costs that engendered. A couple of quick points. We also support trying to carefully collect the monies that are owed, but obviously with regard to the water rates, as you say, this is now quite a long-standing issue, but we also commend the work on waste charges collection, because we need to be fair with our community and those who there should be a fair way of collecting for the services we provide. And just to finish, it's good to put the reserve arrangements for the IT work, which is, we've had some ongoing issues, and it's good that is being addressed. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Councillor Peacock, please.
Yeah, just on the reserves, what's a biodiversity reserve, please? That's on page 102 of the council reserves. It was this year it was 0, but next year it's 46,000.
Russell? You're muted, Russell. Sorry.
Just getting to the page myself.
It's an additional burden, a new burdens fund, I think, Russell.
Yeah. It was additional money, one of the additional grants that I think we came in, and we aren't able to spend it, so the accounting rules are we put it in reserve and draw it down in the new year. So it's a direct result of one of these late grants that's come in. We obviously can't spend it with 48 hours to go. It goes into reserve and we spend it in the new year. The actual conditions of it, I don't know off the top of my head, but I can dig those out and send them across to members if they so wish.
Okay, thank you, Russell. Councillor Williams, please.
I've got two questions, Russell. One was, can you clarify what the hardship reserve will be used for? And I think this touches what Councillor Peacock was talking about in the first meaningful discussion we had this evening. And I'm sort of asking that from the chair of the Aldersley Silly Charitable Trust, of which there are 4 members in the room tonight. And we're seeing an increasing number of hardship requests coming from us coming from the children and adult social care professionals for things like rent, cost of living, white goods, new carpets, heating, childcare, health, travel and accommodation and those sorts of things. So is the hardship reserve you've alluded to specifically for council tax, or is it for wider community benefit? And if so, there's no shortage of wider community benefit that will pick up. And my second question related to the letters that went out with council tax. I had a very boring moment and read my letter, and it was talking about the council tax bandings. And it sort of went back to 1991. And I think the property I lived in was sort of valued at £35,000 to £46,000, which doesn't even buy us a couple of shipping containers by these rates. So I was just wondering, is it normal for local authorities to be using these 1991 bandings? Because if so, it seemed like playing Monopoly and buying something on Mayfair for £100.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Williams Russell.
Yeah, the last one is it's a statutory requirement that despite numerous half promises that the valuation process would be updated and reviewed, it never has been. The bands A to H and the sums that we used to distinguish those at the time, they have never been updated. As I say, it would require central government to have a change in statute to do it, so it's nothing that's our gift, I'm afraid. In terms of the hardship fund, the hardship fund we set up as a budget a couple of years ago, it was to pick up hardship. I think there are a number of statutory support levers that are in the council tax rules that you've got policy for, so council tax support, which allows people that are struggling with council tax, people on low pay, to get reduced council tax bills. That reduces their council tax bills. The hardship fund was different, and it was to pick up either people that fell out of that and didn't fall within the rules for council tax, the council tax support scheme, or for any other hardship. So I think it's something we probably need to review, and whether it is something the council should administer, or whether it would administer it best by passing it over to one of the charities you talked about, may be a better and more appropriate way for that to get to the people that need it.
Okay, thank you very much. I don't have any other questions at the moment. Chief Executive, please.
I just wanted to say well done to all the staff who manage the budgets on behalf of your council. You're in a unique position as a council in that we're not sitting here today looking at a massive overspend of our budget and looking for cuts in our services. So you are a council that lives within its means, which is remarkable. And just to let members know, we are continuing. In fact, Russell and I today were on a call with central government, still pushing the case for fair funding. And I think the bit we're trying to make is the fact that we are very good within living in our means, but hidden in that are some services that we can only afford to deliver at quite a low level because some of the other services are quite high. So I'll give you one example. The average across the country per resident of the cost of a fire and rescue service is £2.62. For us, it's £200. So, we are funding some services at the loss of some other services, but overall we cut our cloth to balance our budget, and that's the point we're trying to make to government, is that some of our high spending services, which are a priority for us, means that some of the other universal services, people on the islands don't get the same service you will on the mainland. So we'll be continuing to push that case.
Thank you very much, Paul. Councillor Marcus, please.
I'd like to echo the thanks to the officers for working within their means, given some of the scare stories, the horror stories that are in the press about the councils in the South East and the decision they've made. I'm glad I'm not sitting in their shoes. I'd just like to propose a recommendation.
Thank you. Councillor Legg, please.
Happy to second those recommendations, and we just talked about charities supporting people having access to healthcare and the cost of transport, which has been something that has dominated this meeting, and just like to sort of point that out to anyone who's listening this meeting.
Thank you very much, Councillor Legg. So I have a proposer and seconder. All those in favour of the recommendation? Thank you. It's unanimous. And thank you very much indeed, Russell, for your input, and to all the officers involved, as our Chief Executive has said. Thank you. So we move on now to item 13, which is the Town Hall Cultural Centre and Museum project update in the hands of our Strategic Director of Place, Economy and Environment, Nicola. Thank you. Welcome, Nicola.
Thank you, Chairman. Hello, members. Just a short report, really, just to give you an update on where we are at this development stage within the Town Hall Cultural Centre and Museum project. As you know, we had some money earlier in this year to re-engage with our design consultants, so we've been able to do some further work around the design for the project. And it's been a co-design process with a lot of end users and stakeholders been engaged through discussions and workshops, working with the design team. This means that we've had some further revisions to the scheme, looking at the opportunities and changes that have taken place since the last round of plans that you saw. The latest changes involve the extension of the footprint of the building to the yard and outbuildings of the adjacent cottage, Bray Cottage. These changes will require planning permission and listed building consent, but the expansion has been done with the approval and encouragement, I suppose, of the tenant of the cottage, because there are a number of benefits that have been proposed to the tenant in relation to the energy efficiency of the home and the opportunity to provide utility and porch facilities to the cottage itself. It also is a win-win, I suppose, because it allows a better internal layout to the town hall, and it allows a better flow within the building and the opportunity to compartmentalise the different functions and the way in which the town hall could operate into the future. The cost consultants have been involved in this redesign and have confirmed that this would be within the existing budget envelope, which surprised me to start with, but when they explained the level of contingency and risk has been reduced because they now understand the requirements for the scheme in more detail, they can cost it more accurately. So the recommendations before you today are firstly to approve the inclusion of the outbuildings and part of the yard area of Praise Cottage into the project scope. To secondly, approve the submission of the list of building and planning permissions required for those changes. And thirdly, to note the internal works have been undergoing some design review as well, and there's an interpretation strategy and concept designs included at Appendix B. For noting at this stage, it's still possible to comment on those plans, and to give you forewarning as well, there's a further consultation for the public and members starting on the week of the 10th of July. So there's further chances to have consultation about how the building is used and to make further design changes before we make the next design freeze to allow the planning applications and list of building consents to be considered, and the internal designs through the image makers work to be confirmed as well. So it's an ongoing story of engagement and change to the project, but hopefully these are improvements for the better. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much, Nicola. Councillor Dean, please.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Well, Nicola said it all really. I just wanted to re-stress the benefits of getting the cottage and increasing the kind of footprint of the new building and the greater flexibility it gives us for the interior design, and that we can compartmentalise different areas and what have you, which Nicola's already said, but I wanted to say that as well. And it's slightly frustrating that we've got to go back to full planning, even though it's not that much different to what was already approved through planning, but that's the way it is. So, yeah, and just to, as Nicola said, Ms. Makers are over next month to do another kind of session with people about the interior fit out and stuff, and hopefully get some more ideas about how it's kind of finally decided it will be done. So I'd encourage everyone to get involved in that. But I'll let Councillor Bedford speak now.
Thank you. Councillor Bedford, please.
Thank you, Nicola. I think I forwarded you maybe one of the emails I've had. I made the mistake of saying, can I have some comments, please? And I got a few. Some of them we've answered because actually it has been passed. And, the concept of the Museum and Cultural Centre, which I think is brilliant, has been passed. And so I need to understand that. But we're still engaging with people, and we still want people's ideas. but there is quite a lot of controversy, as Nicola knows, because I've shared the email with her. I attended a meeting where the consultant said about the inclusion of Parade Cottage. And as you know, I wasn't very happy about it. I'm one of the members of the Museum Association. And I disagree with my learned colleague here. I do think it actually has to go to Parade. It is a very, it is a building that was in Heath's early 18th century book about the Isles of Scilly. And I think the consultant said that they're going to try and keep the original fireplace there. But I think, a couple of us weren't very happy that it would be turned into a toilet wing. Thought there was probably better opportunity for that. I think, regarding the cottage, it's a really good idea to make that more environmentally friendly and energy friendly for the tenants. But I would have thought the local authority had an obligation to do that anyway, but we shouldn't take a museum project to make his home more energy efficient. My only other query is, it talks about the residential tenancy of Parade Cottage will need to be amended. And as far as I'm aware, he has a secure tenancy. Can you give assurances that his secure tenancy will remain?
Nicola?
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, of course, the tenancy will remain. It's the footprint of what's included within his tenancy will change, obviously, because part of the yard area will be included within this project. So we are working very closely with the tenant. The reason why the EPC is a difficult one to achieve is because it's an EPCG, which is the worst possible score you can get for a cottage. It's a listed building, so actually it's exempt from the requirements of the regulations. Having said that, he spotted the opportunity, the tenant, to use the renewable energy from the solar panels and the air source heat pumps on the larger building, the town hall next to him, to provide him with a system that would enable his system to be changed into electric and use the renewable energy from that produced on the town hall. So very astute, and it allows him to change the Arga from the gas bottle operation to electric as well. So that can be included within the project costs, therefore the costs don't land on the council as such. So it's an opportunity, I think, that's been seized and mutually beneficial, I would say.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Marcus, please.
In terms of the improvements to the cottage, what budget is that coming from?
So the improvements that are listed as part of the project works are part of the project costs, so they're not coming through the council's costs. As you know, we have to ensure our stock remains what's called decent home standard, and he is due some additional works required as part of our stock condition survey work in terms of the upgrade to the bathroom. So the upgrade to the bathroom would, of course, be the council's obligation, but there are the other costs associated with improvements to the energy efficiencies through the heating system and the conversion of the Arga will be a project cost, as will be the utility extension and the porch, because there's a benefit to the project from that being incorporated within the existing footprint of the Parade Cottage, allowing the outbuilding to be released for the project. So that's a project cost. So it's not going to cost the council anything in terms of the works listed here, but we have got some works to do to that property to maintain it within our existing required standards.
So a bit of both, then, basically.
Mainly the project. We'll do the bathroom.
Okay. And also with the consultation, I'm just aware, last time the project went out to consultation, there were issues with the planning application as well, the planning consultation. I just want to make sure that those two are separate from each other, with a lead member for planning hat on. Let's keep the processes separate so we can have the results of the consultation that feed into the planning application rather than it being a mismatch.
Chair, just for clarity, just to make sure, we've got Lauren Webbs now, our comms officer, dealing with the work that we need to do for the next stage of the project, and she's working with our own comms team because it's quite complicated. This next stage of consultation on the 10th of July is complicated because if you remember, the planning application list of building consent will be in, so people will be consulted on the planning application list of building consent. At the very same time, we're talking to people about how they want to use the building, how the internal fit-out should work. So you're right, Councillor Marcus, we need to be really clear what questions have been asked and for what purpose. And that's the challenge we've given Lauren Webb, working with Gemma and Tom in our own comms team to make sure that's a successful and seamless consultation, and the right information is gained for the right people to inform the scheme as we move forward, but also to allow members to get feedback on the planning list of building consent.
Robert, I'm sorry, can I just jump in there as well? It came up in project board, whatever day it was yesterday, Lauren is meeting the comms team every week. And the consultation, it was discussed at great length yesterday that any data that's gathered is gathered for the right bit, so that if they're commenting on the fit out, that's taken into account for the fit out, but if they're commenting on plans, that's separate. So it is a very valid question, and it's at the forefront of our mind. So yes, it would be done properly.
Thank you very much, Nicola and Councillor Dean, for that. Councillor Sims, please.
When this came up at the project board, the access to the shed, it was quite interesting. I've never seen people so excited about toilets in my life. But it's actually not because the toilets are such, but it does give the actual. There's a knock-on effect. It gives the rest of the building a lot more flexibility in terms of walkthrough. So it's a very good plan, I think, and I'd like to propose the recommendations.
Thank you very much. Councillor Dean?
I'd happily second the recommendations, but I would just remind Councillor Bedford that when we discussed the plans, I also had some questions about the use of the old shed as toilets. But as Councillor Sims says, the benefits to the building that way outweigh the negative impacts of having toilets in a
Thank you. Councillor Williams.
Yeah, I just wanted to say this is the first time I've seen all the pretty pictures of what the museum potentially could look like. And whereas I was sceptical and pessimistic about the steamship conversation and the ceilings, I'm optimistic about this one. I think they look really good. So I'd like to think they could be shared in the community sooner rather than later. And they might. Excellent. I'm optimistic and encouraged.
Thank you very much. So I have a proposer and a seconder for the recommendations. All those in favour, please. It's unanimous. Thank you very much. Thank you, Nicola. And our next item, the Town Hall Enabling Works, item 14, is also in your hands. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, members. So we're going to keep you busy, I think, over the next few months with Town Hall applications going in and works happening. This report relates to the fact that if we're going to start works on site, we need to start thinking about how we relocate those users that are in there at the moment. So we will be looking at storage solutions in the short term to allow us to decant out of the Town Hall. So who's in the Town Hall at the moment? Well, we've got the Museum Association and we've got a number of officers. We do need some short-term storage. One of the storage solutions that's been proposed at the moment is the use of storage containers. And this is a proposal which the Museum Association has sought grant funding for. They've managed to get grant funding and put some money towards a single container, but we've calculated that storage requirements require at least 6 containers or alternative floor space that equates to that floor area. This means that we need to think about how we use our funding and whether we can find a way of financing some containers through the project. That's been unsuccessful at this stage. So because of time pressures, we need to get on with the decant out of the Town Hall by November or starting in November. It means we need to start thinking about how we can solve this problem ourselves. So the proposal is for us to use some of our corporate capital funding to buy some containers that will be useful for the council in the long term, but will allow us to use the space to allow the museum to decant out there. as soon as possible and within November at the very latest. So the proposal before you is that we use £80,000 or up to £80,000 of our corporate estate budget towards the acquisition of some storage containers that will need to be adapted to make them suitably temperature and humidity controlled, and to have some shelving in there to make useful use of the space. And that we also note that the Museum Association's licence will need to be terminated, so wanted to give them 3 months' notice to do that. We have looked at empty properties, so we've been looking at Seasalt and the Bishop and Wolf to see if that could provide short-term storage solutions. But having looked at that and the potential short-term nature of those potential leases, it means that probably to control this and to give certainty over that decant, we'd probably be in a better position if we bought storage containers. But we're still looking at alternative solutions at this stage. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much, Nicola. Councillor Dean, please.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. It's been a conversation for quite a long time, and it is a little bit frustrating that it's come to this point in time where it's become an urgent issue. But I have to say, although that's slightly disappointing, I do believe that this is a good answer, because the containers, if we agree to purchase them, will be an ongoing asset for the council. As far as the other buildings, Seasalt and the Bishop and Wolf go, it's not that we won't necessarily use. We may still have to use them because of the timescales. One of them anyway. But any money that we put into those is just rent, and it's just money down the toilet. So, at least with the containers, it's already recognised in the strategic asset management plan that we will, as a council, have ongoing storage needs. So this is just a short-term loan to the project, if you like, or to the Museum Association as storage. And for us, longer term, it gives us options going forward. So I think it's a good solution. But it is a little bit frustrating that it's come so close to a point where it would become a crisis. But it's not through want of trying. We have been trying to find a solution to the storage issue for some time, and now I think we found one. So I'm more than happy to propose the recommendation.
Thank you, Councillor Dean. Councillor Mumford, please.
I know this is not strictly something to be moved out of the town hall, but I'd just like to take this opportunity that we need to get on with the fixed trading back at the town hall if they're going to be starting work by next March. We don't want to leave it till January to suddenly find we haven't got any fixed trading. I was just wondering how we were getting on with that.
Chief Executive, please. Thank you, Councillor. There's a meeting set up with officers, I think it's next week or the week after, to begin to identify the sites, which has got highways, environment, planning, licensing, and myself involved to come up with a number of sites in order that we can then go out and consult public on those sites in the timeline you say.
Thank you very much. Councillor Sims, please.
I'd like to second the recommendations, and I would say to Tim, quite often like apps like this, it was sort of better late than never, really.
Thank you. Councillor Mark.
Yeah, I'd review that, say it's better earlier than late. So we've known about this. It was going to happen for the last 6 months, if not longer. The stuff was have to be moved. It's really frustrating to be put in a position where we have to make a decision immediately without any any other sort of consultation about it. It's happened with fixed trading as well. It's not a surprise. I get it's the right solution, but there is no detail about where the containers are going to go, if that needs planning and other works around it. So, but also, just, one thing struck me as well is how much has this project cost the council outside of the grant money already? Because this is another £80,000. Is there we've paid some already, I think?
Well, the £80,000 isn't, that's a council payment for a council asset. Mm-hmm. So there will be a short-term cost to the council, I suppose, for lending them to the Museum Association to store their goods, but it's not, unless Nick can correct me if I'm wrong, this isn't a project cost. So this isn't the council funding project, this is the council funding an asset for us going forward. You see what I mean?
Yeah, that's kind of,
does that make sense?
It's kind of a twisting of words.
Well, at the end of the day, we the council, will have an asset.
Yeah.
That we paid. Well, hopefully, it won't be 80,000. It'll be less than that. But it's an asset.
I get that, but yeah, still there's a lack of detail in the report, like location and.
Yeah, location. I think is still. We think we've got a solution, but it will have to go through planning. Yes.
Yeah.
We're conscious of the time.
And there will be, if it's climate control, there needs to be electricity.
And all that.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's all kind of in hand. But yes, sorry, it's not in the report, but we're getting there.
Thank you very much. Councillor Sim.
Just a small point. I'm inclined to agree with Dan on this, really, but this problem could have thrown the whole project into the long grass, and if you offset the cost, or however you wish to define it, against the liability of the council to the museum, etc., it's a very small sum of money.
Thank you. So I have a proposer and a seconder. Proposer Councillor Sim, seconded Councillor Dean. All those in favour of the recommendations, please. It's unanimous. Thank you very much. Thank you, Nicola. And I think one more paper from you, please. Item 15, the GoEV car share.
Thanks, Chairman. I'll go for the hat trick, shall I? So this is just a short paper written in conjunction with Russell, really, to look at how we deal with the asset transfer that members have already agreed with the community venture for the GoEV project. As part of the GoEV project, of course, we've been hiring out the vehicles for people to use, and that's generated some income. The council have held that income, and as part of the project, we have to use that income to pay for repairs, maintenance, running costs, etc. And any surplus we can't keep as a profit. We have to circulate that back into the project for further investment into the fleet into the future. So whilst the council have been running the project, the council have owned the project, and the community venture have been running on our behalf, that will change shortly as the assets are transferred over. But in the interim period, there's some funding that's been generated, and we need to find a way of passing over that funding to the community venture so that it's recirculated back into the project. What we've done is decided that it's probably better not to give all the income to the community venture to start with, because we don't know what the exact costs still are to complete the project, which ends this month. So the proposal in recommendation was to give them 70% of the income that we've got at the moment to continue to manage the project and run the project, but to hold the rest in reserve until we've completed the final grant claim, to make sure that we've covered all council costs before that balance is passed over to the community venture to continue to run the project into the future, and the car share scheme continues. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Nicola. Councillor Legg, please.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you to the officer for the report. I think this is fairly straightforward. The money belongs to the project and should go to the community venture running the project. It's nice that we've not quite finished this meeting, but we started the meeting talking about a project that we're still at the start of, and now we're at a project that we're at the end of, and a project that has been successful and is providing benefit to the community. So I would be happy to propose the recommendations.
Thank you. Councillor Sim?
Yeah, I'm happy to propose the recommendations. I mean, this is certainly Smart Islands certainly didn't pan out as we anticipated, but this is one aspect of that project which has been successful, and it's put the council in very good position regarding charging points. We've probably got more per capita than anywhere else in the country, which is somewhat odd in a way, but it's good, because at some point there is going to be legislation coming in, and it's going to have to be done, and we can say, okay, tick that box, let's move on to some other intractable problem.
Councillor Dean, please.
I'd just like to publicly say that congratulations to the project. I was one of the very sceptical voices at the beginning of this GoEV car share scheme, and thought it would be a complete waste of time and a waste of money, but I've been proved wrong, and I'm happy to be proved wrong. It seems to be working very well. I just wanted to publicly, or have it said publicly, that the community venture is a not-for-profit organisation, so there's any monies that are raised and any monies that are gained in the future, it will be going back into the project and replacing the vehicles, etc., etc., etc. I know it's in the report, but I just wanted to say it out loud. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So the recommendations are proposed by Councillor Legg, seconded by Councillor Sims. All those in favour, please. It's unanimous as well. Thank you very much. And thank you, Nicola, for your reports.
Thank you, members.
Item 16 on our agenda is the Public Spaces Protection Order, which is in the hand of Mike Coates. Good evening, Mike.
Good evening, Chair and members. Just like to present to you a report on the Public Spaces Protection Order 2023 consultation results and final proposal. There is one correction. At recommendation 2, that members approve the seasonal exclusion of Paul Cresser Garden. The appendix is Appendix C rather than Appendix B. So Appendix C refers to the map of Paul Cresser Garden. The PSPO is due to be extended on the 1st of July 2023. And when a PSPO is extended for another 3 years, the Council are obliged to consult with their key stakeholders, including the police as their chief officer and the Police and Crime Commissioner, and also community representatives and owner-occupiers of land, including, for example, the Duchy. A full public consultation has been conducted as agreed at January's full council meeting. The results are included as an appendix to the report. The proposal that you'll see is to apply a seasonal exclusion to Paul Cresser Garden, and that was born from concern from 2 street traders who operate within this very small enclosed area during the summer season. It would seem a popular spot as what we would call possibly a dog toilet, and leaves a residue of strong dog foul odours. And the traders are often left to clear dog mess before operations begin on that site there. I've made a couple of visits myself and witnessed dog mess very close to the dog bin itself, and the benches were very annoying, really. And witnessed, obviously families on the ground there trying to enjoy a picnic. And I would consider this to be a public health concern. These issues were raised at the informal members' workshop with the concluding consensus that Paul Cresser Garden should be put forward to full council for consideration of a seasonal exclusion, and 47% of respondents from the public consultation were in agreement with that proposal. So the 2 recommendations are, one, that members approve the Public Spaces Protection Order set in Appendix A, that the order takes effect from the 1st of July 2023, and that members approve the proposed seasonal exclusion of Paul Cresser Garden at Appendix C. Happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. I'd like to go now to the Monitoring Officer, Matt Stokes. You've got your hand up, Matt, I think. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Just a question for Mr. Coates to help members with their decision. I know the recommendation 1 refers to the PSPO at Appendix A, but at paragraph 36, there's reference to appendices A and B, and B being the maps. With the correction to Appendix 2, so recommendation 2 to refer to Appendix C, am I right in thinking, Mr. Coates, that your intention was that recommendation 1 should refer to appendices A and B? So that you've got the narrative of the order plus the maps?
Yeah. Appendix.
I think you're muted, Mike.
Oh, sorry. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can now. Yeah.
Yeah. Can you bear with me a minute? I'll just have another look at that. We've got Appendix.
I think the Chief Executive wants to come in a minute.
While you're picking it up, I think the monitoring officer is correct. I think all he's saying is that the written words in the order are Appendix A, and in the maps, the detailed maps are associated with Appendix A. So all he's saying is that number 1, recommendation 1 should read set out in Appendix A and B, which is the associated maps, and that recommendation 2 should change to Appendix C, which is Paul Cresser Gardens.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Are you happy with that, Mike and Matt?
Yes, please. Yeah, I'm happy with that. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Bedford, please.
Thank you, Mike. It's a really good report. Mike and I have had a long chat about this, haven't we? Because
yes,
it's to Holgate Screen, because I have some representations from the public, and I've also noticed it in the questionnaire, where I have read the responses, but there is some concern about that becoming a dog toilet, especially in the early hours, not the early hours of the morning, but sort of 7, 8 o'clock in the morning, and it actually tends to be visitors, that some locals taking their dogs there to do their business. And there are picnic tables there. There are people that eat. That's one of my little walking areas. And there was a whole school of children sitting there on the grass. And I knew in that morning, as I was swimming down off Town Beach, that there had been some dogs being taken there, used it as a loo. Now we have Town Beach there, and it's actually lovely to see all the dogs really enjoying the freedom and enjoying everything. But I had concerns about Holgate Screen not having a seasonal exclusion. But Mike and I agree that maybe this could be monitored this year, and then we would review it again next year.
Yeah, no, I agree with that with you and the council investors. Yeah, no problem. We will have a look at that area with the resources we've got with our. We don't have a dog warden, but we try to do regular patrols through Kieran Dean, our technical officer, Bronzale.
Thank you very much. I'm not sure who was next, but Councillor Marcus, I'll take you next.
Yeah, I was going to say it's a good report. It's good to see, again, the results of the consultation, so we can actually see what the answers to the public are saying. So, put that back to the first report, and I would support the exclusion of recommendation 2 as well. So yeah, I'd like to propose the recommendations with the amendments as set out earlier.
Thank you. Councillor Peacock.
Yeah, just want to know why is it seasonal only? Because, for example, the ones on St Agnes are all the time, the ones at the school all the time. Why is the one on the land equally seasonally only? It may well be it's got through the consultation process and can't be changed, but it does seem a bit odd that the ones at the school are all year. And if I'm misreading it, that one's only seasonal. Just a question.
Mike, would you like to come back in on that?
Yes, basically that particular area there, North Crest Garden, that is used seasonally by the food traders, the street traders. So that was the reason to go for the seasonal exclusion, because beyond the season they won't be there. One of the reasons.
Councillor Sims?
Well, just on that point, I remember with the conversation about it, dogs tend to be on lead throughout the summer months because they can't go on compressor. And I can know from my own experience, it's a very popular flopping place for dogs, and they will go in there if they're off lead. And they're off lead in the winter months, but they're on lead during the summer months, and it's just, I think it would be quite difficult to enforce, because if your dog's off lead on the bank, it's quite likely to just nip in there. It's not really a control issue, and I think that was one of the reasons as well. And also, it's, as Mike said, it's used as a very definite purpose in the summer, and it's just a sort of space in the winter.
Thank you. Councillor Roger, please.
Yes, again, thank you for a good report, and I think generally there's a good balance here of dog restrictions and not. I would support Councillor Bedford's concern with Holgate Green. It is an outdoor restaurant for quite a lot of the time, and I think that needs to be looked at closely going forward. So I would support any further monitoring of Holgate Green. My main concern is enforcement. We have all these restrictions in place, but I know I see dogs off their leads coming up and down Hugh Street every single day of the week, and quite a few of them urinate on the front door of the post office because I clean it up. Enforcement's a big issue because none of this is enforced. So how is it enforced? Is it going to be enforced going forward? And if not, then it's not worth the paper it's printed on. I know that Hugh Street is a particular problem with dogs off lead, and it's by its solicitors that don't have the knowledge, which is probably excusable, but less excusable is it's mainly locals who do have the knowledge. I'll leave it at that.
Well, perhaps we could look into that further, Mike, in due course, about enforcement. Thank you.
No problem.
So I have a proposer, Councillor Legg, seconded Councillor Marcus, to accept these recommendations. All those in favour, please. Thank you. And that's obviously taking due note of the amendments from the monitoring officer. Andy, thank you. Thank you, members. So part 2 reports are for information only. We now move to part 3, containing exempt information. We need to exclude the public to be voted on by members that under section 100A(4) of the Local Government Act 1972, the public be excluded from the meeting for the following item of business on the grounds that it involves the likely disclosure of exempt information as defined in paragraph 3 of part 1 of Schedule 12A of that Act as amended, being information about the business affairs of particular persons. So could I have a proposer for that? Councillor Grottick, seconded Councillor Marcus. All those in favour? Thank you, that's carried.